a recent mass shooting in Nashville that targeted a Christian school has the left blaming Christians and conservatives? Well, it makes no sense, and we're going to talk about what's really going on here. So let's get into it right now. Hello, I'm Ryan Howard. Welcome to Cutting Edge Faith. This podcast is here to help equip you with the truth behind the headlines so that you can navigate the cultural chaos of today. Now, I've no doubt you've heard about the details of this shooting where 6 people were killed, including 3 children that were 9 years old, teachers, administrator, custodian, and the victims at this Christian school. And no doubt you've also heard about the fact that the shooter was a 28-year-old female who identified as a man, who was a transgender. And, well, that has the media thinking they know who to blame for this. And they say that it is actually Christians and news outlets like the Daily Wire and Tennessee conservative legislators. Well, how does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. You see, there's something else going on here, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But this news outlet mentions, just casually mentions that, well, yep, this happened, and she identifies as a transgender person. And by the way, the state legislature in Tennessee passed legislation restricting drag shows and banning surgery and other forms of gender-affirming care for minors. And in other news, and they go on from there. And it's just like, whoa, wait a minute. What? What does that have to do with anything? It has nothing to do with anything, but they're trying to do an association there. They're trying to say, look, see what happens. See, you Christians, you conservatives, not supportive. Look what happens. This is what you get. And it's ridiculous. Or they give a vague notion of some past traumatic experience with some religious group or with some some ill-intentioned person, but there's no evidence of that. And it has nothing to do with it. And by the way, like I mentioned, the shooter was 28 years old. So what would these bans for minors have anything to do with that today? This person's acting on their own accord. And you see, she made her own decisions. She committed this horrific, violent crime. And actually, if they really want to assign blame, now I wouldn't. I think every individual is responsible for their own actions. But what's more of a problem is likely the mental health care that she got was not actually helping resolve any root causes of anything. That's the problem with the transgender stuff with the youth today, is they're addressing symptoms of issues. They're addressing how anxiety is manifesting itself in these different ways. In the past, it was cutting and different ways like that. And it caught on as a social contagion. And now transgenderism is today. Now, that's a general side note to this, but this particular shooter made her own decisions. And, yes, targeted Christians. Well, of course, purveyors of the truth are going to be targeted. And Christian persecution is nothing new. Christian persecutions is nothing new. I've done many episodes about Christian persecution around the world. There are over 360 million Christians around the world today that are under harsh and violent persecution from government, from extreme groups, family members. It's the reality today. And you can check out all those episodes. Now, mental health is what's really going on here. It's a mental health issue. And what happens? We have Biden and all those on the left coming out and saying, we need more gun regulations. See, we need more gun regulations. Well, we're going to get into that in just a second here. And what's really going on there. I got another episode I did previously, not that long ago, that you can check out as well for more details on that. But, I've done lots of research in this area. My wife and I are very involved with early childhood education. I've got a 2-year-old son. I was on the original Blackhawk County, my county's mental health coalition. I've reviewed early childhood grant applications for probably over $1 million. For a decade, I spent doing that for early childhood education grant programs. And so I've seen the research. I know what's going on. I understand what is really and how some of these different agencies have been bought off. We've got agency capture and regulator capture and all those sorts of things. And it's a tragedy that there are so many struggling with anxiety and confusion and many different health issues, mental health issues, and they don't get the actual support that they need to overcome whatever it is that they're struggling with. You know, a lot of the research that I would highly recommend, and I'll have some more episodes on this soon, talks about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And those are things like divorce or single parent home, or some traumatic experience witnessing something, horrific happening, like a murder or something like that, a parent in jail, that sort of thing. And the importance is building resilience. The importance of building resilience. And it's actually incredible how much a child is able to rebound or have the effects of those ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences, minimized if they have at least one stable adult example in their life. Someone investing in them, someone who cares about them, one adult example. That is all it takes to help build that resilience. Just one example of something else, non-toxic. And they can overcome those things and build. And see, when these things are happening at a very young age, it's actually being built into the brain structure while the brain is being formed. And if it's a constant toxic stress on the brain and on the body, well, that becomes the normal operating system. But what needs to happen is children need to have resilience. And that's what we should be talking about today. That's the whole thing missing from this diversity and inclusion discussion. Is it's not about making everybody else act differently. It should be about building resilience in people for anything that is going on. I mean, that's really what we should be talking about. But the thing is, we cheapen this reality of everything I just shared about this mental health, the reality around the mental health and what people actually need. We cheapen that reality by making generalized connections to some vague comment about some religious group did this, or a conservative media outlet, or this conservative legislature, like all these people in the mainstream media and have done, and people all over Twitter and all these sorts of things. And it's just, it's very sad, and it's distracting from the real issue. It doesn't get to the root of the issue. Now, this shooter had apparently left a manifesto and maps. And, well, the LGBT community, these groups, don't want it released. They don't want it released. Now, obviously, there's a case to have it released that would make sense, at least to the families and that sort of thing. But this person was signaling, apparently, that something like this, that they were going to do something like this. Well, you can bet that if this person was not a member of the LGBT community, that these LGBT groups would be demanding that this be released. Say the person had planted a MAGA hat in their thing. I mean, I'm not saying anybody supporting Trump would do that, but obviously we had people infiltrating the January 6th thing and bringing all this Trump gear and all that stuff. But you better believe that these groups would be screaming, "Give the manifesto, give the maps, give the plan." Of course, because they would want to try to find any association with a conservative or Trump or anybody, any Christian group or anything like that. Now, what about gun regulations? Now, there was a video of Biden coming out apparently to address this like 4 or 5 hours after it happened, this shooting in Nashville. And he comes out making jokes about ice cream and kids, looking, good-looking kids and all this stuff. And he just looks completely out of touch. And of course, they start talking about gun laws, gun regulation. Now, I did episode number 150 called "Will More Gun Control Stop Mass Shootings?" I highly recommend you check that out. It's like 13 minutes long, and it really gets into some of the nuts and bolts of it. But in general, let's see. Let's look at Chicago. They got some of the strictest gun laws in the country. High crime. Very high. It's almost like, criminals don't abide by gun laws or something like that. Oh, I of course not. That's crazy. And it's actually only law-abiding citizens who would suffer from more gun control. And in that episode, I talk about red flag laws and some of these different things they're really not going to help anything. They're just going to disarm citizens. Now, I mentioned you can see the police footage, the police body cam of this happen. You can see it. And they were getting a live briefing. I mean, they went in. They didn't wait an hour like one of the other mass shootings that happened in Texas. They went in right away as soon as they arrived, and they were getting a live briefing as they're walking through the school looking for this shooter. And you can actually see it. And now they blur out the parts that are graphic, but it's incredible police work that these people did. And I want to get into what will actually help this situation. Now, of course, we talked about the mental health care issue and all of that. I mean, it's not the gun that's the problem. We've seen people who have done a lot of low-tech murders and low-tech ways to have mass killings and using vehicles and fertilizer. And I mean, it's insane what people can use. So guns are not the problem. But let's set that aside for now, and let's talk about making schools safe. Now, in 2022, there were 647 shootings all year long, mass shootings like this. And in 2023, quarter one, January, February, March, there's 130 mass shootings in the U.S., and 89 of those were at schools. 89 out of 130 so far in 2023, these shootings were at schools. So maybe we should do something to keep schools safe. Well, why not? Well, there simply is not a willingness to do it by people who have the power to do it, because it's not a high cost. It is not a high cost to do this. Well, what can we do? Now, there's all kinds of different barriers and things like that you could talk about. Those could be higher cost, but low cost could be to have an armed officer on the premises. Now, that would be, let's see, for example, what could this cost? Well, we gave Ukraine $140 billion so far from the U.S. Now, there are around 100,000 public schools, 99,000 to 100,000 public schools in the U.S. That's just public schools. And let's say we spend $60,000 a year, have a retired military professional, have somebody there, or a policeman, if the city can do that. That would provide, that would be about $6 billion per year. And so instead of the $140 billion going to the number one money laundering country in the world, or one of the top money, at least in that part of the world for sure, we could have spent money to keep kids safe in public schools for 14 years. That's what that would have covered with just one officer there. Now, it took 14 minutes for police officers to respond and take this person out. 14 minutes. Now, it's a miracle that only 6 people were killed in that 14 minutes. But if somebody was on site, first of all, it would be a deterrent and would likely not have an attempted mass shooting at that school, but it certainly would have a faster response, perhaps just a minute or 2 minutes to get there and to get it taken care of. Now, we guard the things that we value. We guard the things we value. For sure, we guard the things we value. Every single federal building. Have you ever been to a federal building? They have armed guards. They have armed guards. If you go to a federal building, you may have a metal detector, you may not. It just depends. Now, I think they all have metal detectors as well. I had a meeting with the IRS to talk about previous year's tax return to find out what to do about something. And I walk into this room. There's one guy in there, one IRS agent, and one police officer. 2 people in this room, and half of the staff at this federal facility was police officer. Okay, so we guard the things that we care about. Now, they didn't have a metal detector to walk through, but he had a wand. And of course, I had to go through all that. And then he sat there, and then I could talk with the IRS agent. We have armed guards at banks. We have so what's more valuable? Well, children are more valuable than all of that. Children are our future, and children are innocent, and they deserve protection. Now, some private schools are already doing this. Obviously, we've seen lots of changes happening where people are taking their kids out of public schools for many different reasons. And we're seeing home education happening and growing. We're seeing co-ops and communities coming together and families coming together to do education as well. And there are lots of resources that are coming with that. But, for those who don't do that, why wouldn't we want to protect? Why would we want to go after solutions that will actually make a difference and move the needle on these areas? Well, a lot of people are not actually interested in solving this issue. one thing I learned running for office is that there are many who, well, I ran for the Iowa House of Representatives in 2020, and I learned there are many organizations and politicians and people who do not actually want an issue resolved, because there are many things like pro-life, abortion, those sorts of things, and all these other items like gun control, the Second Amendment, and free speech, and all these are very effective fundraising topics. They're very effective fundraising topics, and if it was resolved, well, what are they going to fundraise on? They wouldn't have something to draw the people out emotionally. And now there are many who I've had Sandy Salmon on this podcast, and she is one who is really for we the people. She's a state legislator in Iowa, but there are others who don't actually stand for what they say they stand for. You have to look very far. You see the way their votes go. You see what they talk about and what they do, and it doesn't line up. And it's infuriating and it's sad. And then you see them coming out and giving these big speeches like, "Hey, we're going to do this and let's take guns and all regulate and we need this and that." And it's not actually going to move the needle. It's not going to help. It's just this virtue signaling. Look at me, I'm taking a stand. But they're not actually doing anything. Now, I saw in one of the shootings last year, parents actually went and armed themselves and went to the schools where they weren't doing that at school. And they took that upon themselves. So, well, we can see what's really going on here behind this headline. We've got mental health issues. We cannot blame Christians and conservatives and legislators. These are people who are actually trying to protect children, actually trying to protect our communities and working hard to do that, risking themselves and risking popularity and risking them being attacked and all kinds of things, whether it's in the media, whatever it might be. So let's keep praying. Be praying for the parents and family members of those who were lost in this tragic shooting and all these other shootings. It's very heartbreaking to see these things. So let's be in prayer, believe in God to turn this nation around. God is in charge. Let's close with an encouragement here. God is in charge. He is not turning a blind eye. He knows what's going on. And he has a plan for what's coming out of this. And each one of us, including you, have a part to play in that plan. If you know Jesus Christ, you're filled with the Spirit, God has a plan, and that plan includes you. And so let's prioritize getting with the Lord, staying close with him, getting in the Word. If you knew Jesus Christ was coming back in a few days, what would you change in your life? What would you change? Things get radically simplified when we think about it that way. But God's in charge. Let's keep our eyes on him. We can't look at these tragedies exactly alone to see what God is doing in the nation. God is moving in the midst of these tragedies. So let's be in prayer. Let's keep our hope alive and keep your faith strong. All right, well, visit ryanshoward.com to get more previous episodes and to get in touch with me, ask any questions, or let me know what else you want to hear about on this podcast. Thanks for joining. God bless, and we'll see you in the next episode.